Disney Lorcana landed in the trading card community like a comet coming to Earth with rare and precious minerals. That's not supposed to be a disaster analogy, but nonetheless, it landed with a massive boom. We chased down the boxes for the longest time, and it does seem that even though we've seen products reprinted, we are still paying a high price for these Lorcana products, and we seem to be happy to do so according to all of the sold listings I have collected. But now that Rise of the Floodborn has hit the secondary market, and there is a collectible Disney product, is the Disney Lorcana hype finally over? Are we finally done with all this craziness? Well, let's dig into some of this information and let's find out for ourselves. Lorcana has probably been the most interesting little sliver of the pie or facet of this data vault project. I am steadfast in my belief that Disney Lorcana and Ravensburger made several mistakes with the product. However, it seems to continue to not matter. And the easiest way I can describe this is it's a trading card game that breaks a lot of the rules and doesn't do what we like. We being trading card game fans, longtime trading card game players or collectors, however you find yourself in this hobby. Lorcana seems to be able to break a lot of our rules, do things we don't like, and still find ways to succeed. But over time, everything loses its luster and must rest on its core, kind of what it is, and we're seeing that with Lorcana now. And I want to ask the question today, is the Disney Lorcana hype finally coming to an end? And to do that, we're going to take a look at all of the sales data from TCG Player. Right here we have the visual representation of the data vault, and this is important to track because TCG Player lets sales fall off after 30 days. You would no longer have record of those. You would lose that history of that product and how we, the people spending our hard-earned money on this, perceive these things at a given point. And so I think this project is super fun and important. And if you like that stuff like this, make sure you're subscribed. But let's dig into Lorcana, and for some context, let's talk the first chapter. Now, the first chapter sold better than a standard Magic the Gathering release up to this point. The first chapter sold almost 10,000 boxes, brought in almost $2 million through the online platform. And as we see, if we can take a quick look just for record keeping at the units sold, it was headed by the Draft Booster Box. And something being spearheaded by the Draft Booster Box is very familiar for people who have been around TCGs for a long time. It's a great way to experience trading card games. But I want you to take into consideration some of these trends as we get into the juicy information about Rise of the Floodborn. We see here that Lorcana a bit bucked the trend that we see with most trading card games. In fact, it's the biggest problem Magic the Gathering is trying to solve right now. The fact that a set comes out, everybody gets hyped, we all buy the stuff, and we all get super happy to get it into our hands, and then we, Andy's toy meme, drop it on the ground and say, I don't want to play with this anymore, and we're waiting for the next thing. Well, Lorcana seems to be bucking that trend, at least to a small degree, as we see its release month of August sold roughly 2,700 boxes, followed by another 2,700 in September, and then upon the re-release, when prices came back to a more reasonable point, it's still not cheap enough, but a more reasonable point, we saw it sell almost 2,000 boxes in November. And this is not something we normally see. For context, let's take a look at the most recent Magic the Gathering set. The Lost Caverns of Ixalan is ramping towards that process that we see here, and if we take a look at Wilds of Eldraine, the set right before Lost Caverns of Ixalan, we will notice that there can be an expectation to see something fall off. Now, the release date for Wilds of Eldraine and it being a popular set bucks this trend a little bit, so it's just interesting to look at how Lorcana is breaking that mold. But what about Rise of the Floodborn? What about how Disney is performing with the new product? Well, Rise of the Floodborn is seeing, how do I put it? Almost exactly the same numbers up to this point as the first chapter. Rise of the Floodborn is on pace to sell, 2,700 boxes, just like for the first chapter on TCG Player in the month of November, its release month. And this is important because Rise of the Floodborn is selling without the benefit of ever having a super cheap box. If we take a look at the history of the Draft Booster Box for Rise of the Floodborn, we see that the box has always been an expensive product, as the average average price is up around $301, with the cheapest sale coming on the platform at $220. Make sure you follow along and subscribe and all that, because if that sale is faux pas as we re-blow away some of the data that TCG Player deems invalid and pulls from their system, we will then remove it from ours and we will know that was a fake sale. But most importantly, it's interesting when you look at the average price per month. We see, $390, $357, which are ridiculous pre-order prices, and now the box is down to an average price over the month of November of $281. So we are buying this product even though it has always been at a high price, and it doesn't have the benefit that the first chapter had when it came to early on having cheap booster boxes. I mean, here we see when we go to the booster box of the first chapter, we see this price history, and while it was never where it should be at MSRP, which, let's point out, let's take a second, Ravensburger is trying to get this thing to MSRP. They're going to print these things into the ground if they have the ability. And if you caught it on a live stream, I had a wonderful commenter pointing out that Ravensburger's printing process might give them the ability to do so. So if you like information like that, we talk about stuff like that on the live stream, and people come through with some really cool ideas. So it's just a fun way to interact with the community. It makes me think of it every time we talk about Lorcana's printing process. But the first chapter sold this many boxes, having the benefit of cheap prices that ramped into high prices that came down because of the reprint. And with the rise of the Floodborn not having that ability, or not having that benefit, it is still keeping up so far in number of box sales. So it's time to answer the question. Knowing all of this information, compiling everything we've looked at, is it safe to say the Disney Lorcana hype is dead? Well, clearly not. However, it is coming back down to earth, as everything does. We see this not just with trading card games, but with everything we enjoy. The first iteration of something that finally goes public or is released out to us that we have been anticipating for some time hits, and we have the ability to get this thing in our hands or experience this, then, we get all in, we get excited, and we go in and we want to experience it. Movies are a great example. You go see a movie, but then you don't necessarily want to watch the same movie over and over and over again. And while you and I might not feel that way, that's how trading card game releases can start to feel for some less ingrained people who are less dedicated to the community, find themselves on the more casual end of the spectrum. And while Lorcana, I believe, supports them, and I believe does a great job, if they could get their product to MSRP, of giving that portion of their community everything they need, I do think that the shine is going to start to wear off for Disney Lorcana. But that's not doom and gloom. I think the shine is going to start to wear off, but I think the game is good enough to stand its ground on its gameplay. It is not this in-depth, crazy, complex game that Magic the Gathering is, although it has more levels to it than people ever give this game credit for. And it might just not be as competitive or as in-depth as Magic, because there's not 30 years of cards to go through when it comes to some of these things. So I think people don't give Lorcana its credit when it comes to the depth that you can the depth to which you can experience the gameplay. But I do think it's going to have to live on that. It's going to have to live on people collecting Disney and getting involved in Disney Lorcana in a way that, we're used to with things like Pokemon. And I think this game does an extremely good job of that. Now, I'm excited to see how the collector product performs. I'm a bit skeptical on the second release, having a collector product. I know it's the Disney 100, D100 and all that, but I'm a bit skeptical. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. I know so many of you out there are just like me. You're fans of trading card games, and this game just breaks the mold of everything we have come to know and experience with TCGs. So try to remove yourself from what you always see with trading card games and what you've been trained to view as success. Try to give Lorcana a bit of credit for how wide and how many people it reaches, and let me know what you think about the game. And as always, if you've never shared a hometown TCG video, there's never been a better time than right now. I love conversations like this. I love growing the community. We just passed 7K. We passed 7,000 subscribers, so thank you all for smashing that sub button. Thank you so much for hanging out. Until next time, you guys know me. My name is Josh, and, well, we'll see you around. All right, bye.